Hello everyone. So in today's video, we are going to go over this paper, Hate Speech and Counter Speech Detection, Conversational Context Does Matter, by Xinshen Yu from the University of North Texas, Eduardo Blanco from Arizona State University, and Ling Zi Hong from the University of North Texas. I'm really sorry if I mispronounce any of those names. So let's delve into the abstract first. Also, this paper is from NACL 2022. So this is a very recent paper. The abstract. Hate speech is plaguing the cyberspace along with user-generated content. This paper investigates the role of conversational context in the annotation and detection of online hate and counter speech, where context is defined as the preceding comment in a conversation thread. We create a content-aware dataset for three-way classification task on Reddit comments, so hate speech, counter speech, or neutral. Our our analysis indicates that context is critical to identifying hate and counter speech. Human judgment change for most comment depending on whether we show annotators the context. A linguistic analysis draws insights from the language people use to express hate and counter speech. Experimental results show that the neural networks obtain significantly better results if context is taken into account. We also present qualitative error analysis, shedding light into when and why context is beneficial, and the remaining errors made by our best model when context is taken into account. So I really liked, so I haven't read the paper first, but the title really caught my eye because they're talking about conversational context. So a lot of hate speech works, they don't use this context, so they might study a tweet in isolation but not why that tweet was sent, what that tweet was addressing, etc. The tweet might sound hateful on its own, but if say you look at the context behind the tweets, then you might realize, oh, this is counter speech, or this is not hate speech, this is some neutral text given the preceding comments. Alright, so the introduction. The advent of social media has democratized public discourse on an unparalleled scale. Meanwhile, it is considered a particularly conducive arena for hate speech. Online hate speech is prevalent and can lead to serious consequences. At the individual level, the victims targeted by hate speech are frightened by online threats that may materialize in the real world. So people might threaten that we might attack you and stuff. At the societal level, it has been reported that there is an upsurge in the offline hate crimes targeting minorities. There are two common strategies to combat online hate: disruption and counter speech. Disruption refers to blocking hateful content or users. To scale this strategy, researchers have proposed methods to identify hate. While these interventions could de escalate the impact of hate speech, they may violate online free speech. So, additionally, attacks at the micro level may be ineffective as hate networks often have rapid rewiring and self repairing mechanisms. So, people who are banned might just form a new account, form a new group, form a new subreddit, etc. Counter speech refers to the direct response that counters hate speech. It has been shown to be more effective in the long term than disruption in theoretical and empirical studies because you're head on addressing the fake points or the misguided points made by the person who's spreading hate speech. So it might also stop them and make them realize, oh, I'm doing something wrong. Identifying hate and counter speech in natural conversations is critical to understand effective counter speech strategies and the generation of counter speech. So, most corpora with either hate or counter speech annotations do not include conversational context. Indeed, they annotate a user based comment as hate or counter based on the comment in isolation. Therefore, systems trained on these corpora fail to consider the effect of contextual information on the identification of hate and counter hate. Recent studies have shown that context affects annotations in toxicity and abuse detection. We further investigate the effect of context on the task of identifying hate and counter hate. Task 1 shows examples where a comment denoted as target is hate, neutral, or counter hate is depending on whether the preceding comment denoted as parent is taken into account. So, in the top example, the target goes from neutral to hate when taking into account the parent. It becomes clear that the author is disparaging short men. In the bottom example, the target goes from hate to counter hate as the author uses offensive language to counter the hateful content in the parent. This is common strategy in to express counter speech. So let's have a look at what are they referring to. Yeah. So I won't read it out, but so this, if you just take this into isolation, this might sound neutral, but since you have this context, then it is hateful. Similarly, uh, it's hateful if you just take this into isolation, but if you take this into isolation, then it is being considered to be counter speech or counter hate. All right. So in this study, we answer the following questions: does conversational context affect if a uh, comment is perceived as hate, neutral, or counter hate by humans? Do models to identify hate, neutral, and counter hate benefit from incorporating context? So spoilers, they do, and it helps out. To answer the first question, we create a collection of parent target Reddit comments and annotate the targets which we label hate, neutral, and counter hate in two independent phases. So showing annotators only the target or the parent and the target. We limit context to the parent comment while the full conversation could provide additional information. It is also known to affect annotators' stance and introduce biases. We find that human judgments are substantially different when the parent is shown. Thus, the task of annotating hate and counter hate requires taking into account the context. To answer the second question, we experiment with the context unaware and context aware classifiers to detect if a given target is hate, neutral, or counter hate. Results show that adding context helps the classifier significantly. Alright, so the major contributions are a corpus with 6,846 pairs of parent and target with annotations for hate, neutral, or counter hate. Annotation analysis showing that the problem requires taking into account context as the ground truth changes. And corpus analysis detailing the kind of language people use to express hate and counter hate. Experiments showing the context-aware neural models obtain significantly better results, and qualitative analysis revealing when context is beneficial and the remaining errors made by the best context-aware models. So, I guess this all is pretty self-explanatory given we've discussed the individual points now. So let's have a look at the related works. Hate speech in user-generated content has been an active area of research. Researchers have built several data sets on that, we've all seen. Compared to hate speech detection, few studies focus on detecting counter speech. Collect, so Matthew et al. Collect and hand code 6898 counter hate comments from YouTube videos targeting Jews, blacks, and LGBT communities. Garland et al. 2020 work with the German tweets and define hate and counter speech based on the communities to which the author belong. He et al. 2021 use a collection of hate and counter hate keywords relevant to COVID-19 to create a dataset containing 359 counter hate tweets targeting Asians. Another line of research focuses on curating datasets for counter speech generation using crowdsourcing or with the help of trained operators. However, the synthetic language is rarely as rich as languages in the wild. Even if even if it were conclusions, even if it were conclusions and models from synthetic data may not transfer to the real world, since the real world data undergoes linguistic drifts, rapid changes, reacts to public uh, outrages, etc. So in this paper, we work with user-generated content expressing hate and counter-hate rather than synthetic content. So table 2 summarizes existing datasets for hate and counter hate detection. Most of them do not include the context information. In other words, the preceding comments are not provided when annotating targets. Context does affect human judgment and has been taken into account for hate detection. Gao and Huang 2017 annotate hateful comments in the nested structure of Fox News discussion threads. Vision et al. Introduced a dataset of Reddit comments with annotations in six categories, taking into account context. However, the inter-annotator agreement is slow, so a fly's kappa of only 0.267, and the number of counter-hate instances is small, it's only 220. Moreover, both studies use contextual information without identifying the role context plays in annotation and detection. Pavlopoulos et al. 2020 allow annotators to see one previous comment to annotate Wikipedia conversations. They find context matters but provide no empirical evidence showing whether models to detect toxicity benefit from incorporating context. Manini et al. Re-annotated an existing corpus to investigate the role of context in abusive language. They found context does matter. Utilizing conversational context has been explored in text classification tasks such as sentiment analysis, stance, and sarcasm. So in this paper, we investigate the role of context in hate and counter hate detection. So you have all these data sets, and it just mentions whether it's has context or not. So half of the non-counter ones do not, and half of the counter ones also do not. And you can see the size. So these are the different data sets essentially, and what all labels they do have. Alright. So the dataset collection and annotation. We first describe a procedure to collect parent-target pairs where both parent and target are Reddit comments in English. Then we describe the annotation guidelines and the two annotation phases. So first they show only the target and then the parent and target. The two independent phases allow us to quantify how often context affects the annotation of head and counter head. So they focus on Reddit, and since it has many diverse topics, they use a list of hate words to retrieve Reddit conversations to keep the annotation costs reasonable while creating a relatively large corpus of counter speech. We start with a set of 1726 hate words from two lexicons, so hate base and harassment corpus from Rizwan et al. We remove ambiguous words following El Sharif et al. To collect parent-target pairs, we use the following steps. First, we retrieve comments containing at least one hate word. Second, they create a parent-target pair using the comment with hate word as target and the preceding comment as parent. And then they create a parent-target pair using comment with hate word as parent and each of its replies as target. So essentially, once they identify a hateful comment, it acts as a target once and as a parent once as well. Lastly, we remove pairs if the same author posted the parent and target. So this means that we are not really looking at a conversation at that point. It's just one person, so it's more likely to have the same effect or the same intention. We retrieve 6846 parent target pairs with push shift from 416 submissions. We also collect the title of discussion from each pair from which each pair is retrieved. So the annotation guidelines are they use the definition of hate by Ward and counter hate by Matthew et al. And Vision et al. So hate, counter hate, and neutral. These are their definitions. They use the Amazon Mechanical Turk as the crowdsourcing platform. They replace username with placeholders for privacy concerns. The annotations took place in two independent phases. First, they're only shown the parent, then uh, they click a button to show the target, and then another short delay, they submit their annotations. Alright. Delays are at most a few seconds and proportional to the length of the comments. A rationale behind delays is to force annotators to read the parent and target in order. In the second phase, annotators label each target without seeing the preceding parent. A total of 375 annotators were involved and 299. So in the first phase, 375 and 299 in the second phase. There is no overlap between annotators, thus we eliminate the possibility of biased annotators. Remembering the parent in the second phase. So this is something which needs to be done in more works because if you show annotators the same sentence, then they might have preconceived biases. So annotation quality crowdsourcing may attract spammers. So for quality control, they have a few requirements. The person must be in US, have 95% approval rate over at least 100 human intelligence tasks. We also block annotators who submit more than 10 human intelligence tasks with an average completion time below 5 seconds, so half the time required in our pilot study. As the corpus contained vulgar words, we require annotators to pass the adult content qualification test, and the reward per task is, I guess, 5 cents. The second effort is to identify bad annotators and filter out their annotations until we have a substantial inter-annotator agreement. We collect 5 annotations per uh, human intelligence task and compute MACE, which is multi-annotator competence estimation for each annotator. MACE is devised to rank annotators by their competence and adjudicate disagreements based on annotator competence and not the majority label. Then we use Krippendorf's alpha to estimate inter-annotator agreement. Alpha coefficients at or above zero point 0.6 are considered substantial and above zero point 0.8 are considered nearly perfect. And they do the following 3 steps: compute MACE, disregard annotations by the annotator with the lowest MACE, and compute Krippendorf's alpha again and again till alpha is does not exceed zero point 0.6. Once it does, then you have substantial agreement. The final corpus contains 6,846 pairs and a label assigned to each target, so hate, counter hate, or neutral. The ground truth we experiment with, so in section 5, is the label obtained taking into account the parent. The second phase, which disregards the parent, was conducted for analysis purpose. We split the corpus into two subsets. So a gold corpus with alpha greater than 0.6 and silver corpus with the remaining. As we see, the silver pairs are useful to learn models. Alright. So analysis. Does conversational context affect if a comment is perceived as hate or counter hate? Yes, it does. So table 3 presents some examples. So this is the confusion matrix. So if you have showing annotation change depending on whether annotators are shown the parent of the target comment. So if you do not have a parent, then these are the scores, and if you have the parents, then these are the scores. So you can see these are substantially different. So many target comments that are perceived as hate or counter hate become neutral when the parent is provided. More surprisingly, many target comments are perceived with the opposite label, so from hate to counter hate, when the parent's comments are shown. We show examples of label change in table 4. In the first example, so let's have a look at them first. Uh, so without the context, this looks to be neutral to the annotator, but with the context, this is hateful because this seems to be attacking, I guess. Again, without the context, it would be neutral, but with the context, this seems to be counter speech. And again, with the last one, it goes hate, while with it seems to be counter to the annotators. Okay, all right. So, in fact, a female is the target of the hate in the parent, and the author of target replies with even more hatred. So in the second example, the target alone is insufficient to tell if it is counter. When annotators see the parent, however, they understand the author of target counters the hateful content in the parent by showing empathy towards the male carrier. In the last example, the target alone is considered hate because it attacks someone by using the phrase sick person. When the parent is shown, the annotators understand the target as calling out the parent to be inappropriate. Alright, so this makes sense. So now the label distribution and linguistic insights. Figure 1 shows the label distribution for all pairs, rightmost column in each block, and for pairs in which comment without hate word, with hate word, that is the comment containing at least one hate word is the parent or target. The most frequent label assigned to the target comment is neutral, followed by hate 28%, counter hate 23%. While target comments contain a hate word are likely to be hate, some are counter hate with context. We analyze the linguistic characteristics of titles, parents, and targets. When the targets are hate or counter hate, with context to shed light on the differences between the language people use in hate and counter speech. We combine the set of hate words with profanity words to check for profanity words. Alright, we analyze sentiment and cognitive factors using the sentiment analysis and cognition engine, so CAN's lexicon, a popular tool for psychological linguistic analysis. Statistical tests are conducted using unpaired t-tests between the group of which the target are called counter hit or hit. We also report whether each feature passes the Bonferroni correction as multiple hypothesis tests are performed. We draw several interesting insights. So question marks in target signal counter hit, they are often rhetorical questions. Alright, so this seems reasonable. Fewer first person pronouns and more second person pronouns in the parent signal than the target, in which more is more likely to be counter hit. This is due to the fact that people tend to target others in hateful context. Alright, so they are using a second person pronoun. High profanity count in the parent signal than the target is counter hit, while high profanity count in the target signals hate. Alright. More words related to awareness, enlightenment, and problem solving the target signal counter hit. When there are more negative words in the parent, the target tends to be counter hit. Targets labeled as counter hit contain fewer negative and disgusting words. Alright, so these are the analysis which they've drawn. So now let's have a look at the modeling which they've done. This is again the distribution, and these are the scores for the Bonferroni test and the p-value test. Uh, so you can have a look at this linguistic analysis. I can't really explain this because I'm not very well experienced with linguistic analysis. I'll have to look this up later myself. Alright, so the experiments and results. We build neural network models to identify if a target is hate, counter hit, or neutral. So they have 70% training, 0.15 validation, 0.15 testing. Silver instances are used only for training. Alright, so they've split the gold ones like this and put the silver ones with the training. So the architecture is a Roberta transformer with classifier on top. The neural architecture consists of pre-trained Roberta transformer and a fully connected layer to make predictions. To investigate the role of context, we consider two textual inputs, so the target alone or the parent and target. We concatenate the target and the parent with the separator special token. We conduct multiple runs of experiment which show consistent results. The hyperparameters and other implementation details are presented in the appendix. We also experiment models that take the title of the discussion as part of context, but it is not beneficial. So essentially, they're saying that the title of the discussion is not aiding in the score. So they have two strategies. So blending gold and silver, we adopt a method by Schnark et al. to determine whether silver annotations are beneficial. There are two phases, and blending epochs using all gold and a fraction of silver, and then N epochs using all golds. So in each blending epoch, silver instances are fed in random order to the network. The fraction is determined by a blending factor. The first blending epoch is trained with all gold and all silver, and the amount of silver to blend is reduced by alpha in each epoch. And pre-training with related tasks, we also experiment with several corpora to investigate whether pre-training with related tasks is beneficial. Specifically, we annotate our pre-train our model with existing corpora, annotating hateful comments, hateful or non-hateful, and hate speech, offensive or neither, sentiment, negative, neutral or positive, sarcasm, and stance. So now let's have a look at the results. They've shown the results with the test plate in table 6. The majority baseline always predicts neutral. The remaining rows present the result with the different target training settings. Training with the target of both the parent and target, training with only gold or blending silver annotations, and pre-training. We provide here results pre-training with the most beneficial task, stance detection, and presenting additional results in the appendices. Blending gold and silver annotations require tuning alpha, so we did empirically using the training and validation splits. Like other hyperparameters, we found the optimal value to be 0.3 when blending silver and zero point 0.1 when blending silver and pre-training with a related task. As shown in table 6, blending gold and silver annotations obtains better F1 weighted average than using only gold. We also find that models pre-trained for stance detection obtain better results than pre-trained with other tasks. Pre-training with stance detection benefits model trained without context and models with context. These results indicate that the stance information between parent and target is useful to determine whether the target is hate, counter hate, or neutral. Alright, so these are the results which they mentioned in the table. So if they are incorporating the parent and also using the silver annotations with the related tasks, here their alpha is point, blending factor is 1, then they have the most number of, uh, then they have the best results, I guess, in terms of the weighted averages. So, alright. We make two observations about the results obtained during using neither strategy. First, using target alone obtains much better results than majority baseline. In other words, modeling the target allows the network to identify some instances of hate and counter hate, despite the counter requires the parent. Second, incorporating the parent comment is beneficial. The F1 score for all classes are higher, and so is the weighted average. The findings are consistent using either strategy or both. The F1 scores of the three baselines are equal to or better than the target only models. So if they're using both parent target. Finally, the network blending gold and silver annotations and pre-training with stance detection achieve the best performance. This results in statistically significant changes compared to target only model without blending silver or pre-training with related tasks. Now the qualitative analysis. When is adding the context beneficial? When does our model make mistakes? To investigate these, we manually analyze the following: the error made by the target only network, data fixed by the context aware network. So this would tell you where the context parent is helping. The error made by the context aware networks on related tasks and blending silver annotations. So where does even the parent model with silver and related task fail? So when does context complement target? We analyze the errors made by the model. The most frequent type of error fixed by the context aware model is lack of information. In this case, the parent comment is crucial to determining the label of the target. So a rhetorical question. So in the example, knowing whether what the author target refers to is crucial to determine the target is humiliating women as a group. The second most frequent error type is negation. So in the example in table 7, taking into account the parent allows the context-aware network to identify the author of the target is scolding the author of parent and thus countering it. Nobata et al. And Kyan et al. Have pointed out that sarcasm and irony make detecting abusive and hateful content difficult. We find evidence supporting this claim. We also discovered that by incorporating the parent commit, a substantial amount of the errors are fixed. Indeed, 19% of the errors fixed by the context-aware network include sarcasm or irony in the target commit. Finally, the context-aware model takes into account the parent fixes many errors in which the target commit is hid despite it does not contain swear words. So the context-aware network taking into account the parent fixes many errors in which the target commit is hid despite it not containing swear words. Right, so the parent gives this info. In the example, the target is introducing additional hate words, which can be identified by the context-aware model when the parent information is used. And when does the best model make errors? In order to find out this, we manually analyze 200 random samples in which output differs from the ground truth. Despite 27% of errors fixed by the context-aware network, including negation, the examples in table 8 is basically challenging as it includes a double negation. We observe rhetorical questions are most common. Then you have the finding is consistent with the findings by Schmidt and Vigan. In the example, the best model fails to realize that the target is hateful as it disdains the author of parent. Swear words are present in substantial number of errors, wrongly predicting a target without swear words as counter hit or neutral for 8% of errors, and wrongly predicting a target with swear words as hit account for another 8%. As pointed out by Davidson, hate speech may not contain hate or swear words, and vice versa. Comments containing swear words may not be hateful. Finally, we observe intricate text and 7% errors. Our best model identifies the target. I have lost all respect for her as hate, probably because by identifying the agreeing stance of the parent. Indeed, the author of target expresses his or her attitude without vilifying others. Hence, the ground truth label is neutral because he's not like attacking a particular community or a particular group. So these are the types of errors, and these are so this table is the one where you have the error made by the context aware network, so which takes in the parents as well. Right, so conclusions in future work. Conversational context does matter. We have demonstrated so by analyzing whether humans perceive it differently and investigating whether neural networks benefit. We find 38.3% of human judgments change with the parent. Experimental results show that networks incorporating the parent yield better results. Additionally, we show that noisy instances and pre-training with relevant datasets improve model performance. They have released a corpus of Reddit comments with the target annotations. Our work has several limitations. First, we only consider context as the parent commit, while more context might be beneficial, but this would also require more careful annotation guidelines or more careful procedures for annotation because we don't want it to bias annotation. Our research agenda includes exploring reliable strategies to consider more context and identify which parts are more important. Second, people may have different opinions about what constitutes hate and counter speech due to different tolerances. We obtain the ground truth according to annotator reliability, which may lead to controversial samples falling in the silver set and thus being considered only for training and not for testing. Finally, the keyword sampling used to create a corpus may introduce biases. Despite we partially mitigating the issue by considering hateful comment in both parent and target, community-based sampling could be applied in our future work. And they have the ethical statement, and they've also got their acknowledgements. They mentioned how much they paid the annotators and how they obfuscated the user identities. So I won't be covering that stuff. And there's an appendix with some more discussion about what the learning rate was, what all experiments they ran. So you can have a look at this on your own time. This is how they've obfuscated the user identities by using user A, user B. I'm a little curious, do these colors affect the annotator's perception because red is often a more aggressive color, if I may say, but that might be a future line of research. So thank you guys for joining in. Hope you like this work. Hope you all look at the paper yourself as well. I guess the code is also available online because I believe, yeah, they've uploaded the code as well. So thank you guys for joining in. Hope to see you again next time as well.